So, welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah, this is where we take the material you provide us and, really unpack it.
Exactly. We look for the most important or surprising bits. We're basically your guides through this stuff.
And filters, too. Our job is just to pull out the key points, the connections, based strictly on what's in that material. We're focused only on the source content itself.
Okay, so today we're diving into something pretty vivid. It's excerpts from a YouTube video transcript. And the speaker in this video, they're making predictions, observations, a lot about the Middle East conflict and where it might be heading globally.
Right. So our mission here is pretty clear. Analyze the claims, the perspective within this specific transcript.
Yeah, we're not saying if it's right or wrong. We're just looking at the source itself, what it presents.
Okay, let's get into it.
So the speaker starts off referencing some past predictions they claim checked out. Things like Middle East retaliation and tapes on Tusk.
Right. We don't have the details on those claims in this material, but it feels like they're trying to, establish some credibility first. Asserted foresight, maybe?
Seems like it. They also say they're going to really focus, try to tune in to these visions they're having.
And then, boom, straight into a very specific, very immediate prediction about the Middle East.
Yeah.
The source claims Israel is planning a very quick action, the target. Iran, the goal, to bring Iran to its knees.
Wow, okay. Quick action, do they say what kind?
It's quite specific, actually. They mention large liquid tanks, could be fuel, maybe oil storage, something like that.
That is specific.
Yeah.
But just hitting tanks doesn't exactly bring a nation to its knees, does it?
Exactly. And the source goes deeper. They claim the real goal, especially under Netanyahu, isn't just destroying uranium sites, which is often the public focus,
Right.
but actually engineering a revolution, an overthrow in Iran, to break its internal peace, as the source puts it.
A revolution. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a much bigger claim. And they connect this to history.
They do. A really potent comparison. They see this potential action against Iran as being like how Iraq was allegedly conquered and put under U.S. and Israeli oversight after Hussein. The source explicitly says the goal is permanent change, gaining insight into Iran, altering its policy forever. They frame this moment as like to be or not to be for Iran.
So this isn't just a reaction, according to the source. It's a plan.
Yes, emphatically a plan, deliberate, meant to be quick and effective in achieving that deeper revolutionary goal.
Okay, but this is where it gets, well, even more intense. For this plan to work, the source says something else is needed.
A provocation, and not just any provocation, a painful provocation.
Painful provocation. What does that mean in this context?
It ties into another vision the source describes.
Right.
Iran using forbidden weapons.
Forbidden weapons, like what?
Described as untypical nuclear or dirty bombs or missiles, maybe experimental. Not entirely clean is the phrase used.
Dirty bombs. But the source themselves points out that would be, well, suicidal for Iran's government, wouldn't it? The international reaction.
Exactly. The source seems to grapple with that contradiction, and that leads them to this theory
Which is?
that maybe these dirty bombs aren't launched by Iran at all. Maybe they're a cleverly used provocation.
Orchestrated by someone else.
That's what the source suggests, yeah. Maybe fired from somewhere else entirely, like U.S. bases in Syria are mentioned as a possibility just to create the pretext.
Wow. So the prediction isn't necessarily Iran using them, but them being used to frame Iran.
That seems to be the core of the theory presented in the source. They call it a provocation to what Israel will do afterward. And get this. The source says this trigger, even with the damage it might cause, is seen in the vision as profitable for Israel's larger goals regarding Iran.
Profitable. That's a chilling word choice.
Yeah.
And if this provocation happens, what's the predicted Israeli response?
A massacre, according to the source. But interestingly, targeted, focused on one specific area of Iran, not the whole country.
Okay, so a targeted, devastating response after a potentially staged provocation. This is quite a scenario. Is there anything else involved?
Yes. Another major element the source brings in, the three nations.
3 nations. Who are they?
The source doesn't say who, just describes them as strong nations who are silently considering and secretly discussing getting involved.
Involve how?
To stick a wedge into what Israel is doing, to actually threaten Israel with war.
Threaten Israel. So this isn't just diplomatic support for Iran.
No, the source is clear on that. It's not just symbolic. It's about strongly opposing what they see Israel and the U.S. doing towards Iran. They'd apparently stand up for Iran and also for Gaza. But again, unnamed, just these powerful 3 nations.
Given this pretty terrifying sequence the source lays out. Do they offer any way out, anything that could prevent this predicted massacre in Iran?
According to this vision, yeah, there are potentially two things.
Okay.
One is Iran sitting down for urgent, immediate talks, like right now.
And the other?
Is these three nations actually stepping in, acting as that wedge and making serious threats against Israel?
And if neither of those happens?
Then the source says things will go very badly. Pretty stark.
Very badly. And does the source elaborate on what very badly looks like? The escalation?
Oh, yes. If things proceed down this path, the source predicts that Iran, before any potential major Israeli strike hits them, will launch its own attack on Israel.
Bigger than before?
A larger attack than any previous ones? Yes,
Yeah,
that's the claim. And then comes the peak of this dire prediction.
Go on.
The source predicts that from a devastated Iran, a world war will begin.
World War. Triggered by this.
That's the explicit claim. The attack on Iran is described as the first opening of a great war in the region, or actually a world war.
Wow. And they tie this to the current time.
Yeah, the source calls this specific year cursed, linking it directly to this trajectory. They also mention a pogrom mass destruction in the Middle East as part of this.
This is incredibly bleak. And there was something else, wasn't there? Something really strange.
Yes. Linked almost tangentially but chillingly to the start of this more serious war, the source describes something being released.
Released?
Something that causes people's skin to ooze and develop boils. It's described as looking hideous compared to leprosy.
That's deeply disturbing. And didn't the source link this to another vision they'd had? About isolation?
Exactly. They connect it to a past vision they had about areas in the Middle East being cut off from the world. Not physically walled off, but places people couldn't leave or enter.
Okay.
So the source links that isolation idea to this skin disease, suggesting people who get it would have to be completely isolated.
Left alone.
Left themselves is the phrase. Alive, but with no rescue. The source even uses the word plague. It really shows how the source mixes these huge geopolitical predictions with these very visceral, almost, apocalyptic details.
Stepping back a bit, besides the predictions, the source includes some broader commentary, right, on the current situation.
Definitely. Their strong criticism of the world, perceived as being passive or impartial, specifically mentions Gaza, like the reports of civilians killed seeking aid, and also actions involving Russia.
And they talk about the U.S. role.
Very directly. The source claims Israel's actions, as envisioned, are only possible because of U.S. military and defensive support. They call Israel a very small state that wouldn't act this way otherwise.
Does the source suggest consequences for this?
They pose a rhetorical question. Will this behavior take revenge? And the prediction is yes, the price will be paid by all of us. Through total impoverishment, a global crisis, loss of life in war. They see current events as a kind of brutal competition.
They also draw contrast with the past, I remember, regarding Gaza.
Yeah, quite poignant. Contrasting the current destroyed state with no life to how they remember it years ago, buildings, streets, cafes, actual life.
And Iran. They see it fitting a pattern.
Yes, explicitly. The next piece of the same game, they believe, was played out in Iraq with Hussein and Libya with Gaddafi, suggesting a historical playbook of intervention.
But they distinguish the people from the state.
Yes. They express respect for the Iranian people, even mention historical help they gave to Poles during World War II. So it's a critique of state actions, not the population.
And that phrase about America.
Freewheeling America, wolna Amerykanka, is the Polish phrase used, suggesting unchecked action in the Middle East. But the source adds a warning. These are not the times for the U.S. and Israel to act with impunity, in their view.
Okay. Were there any other smaller points mentioned?
A couple, yeah. Briefly, a prediction that China will do nothing literally on its own for now. They'll argue, apparently, but won't physically join the conflict.
Right.
The source also expresses strong doubt that things can just be normal again after all this. And then there's a quick tangent, complete in shifting gears, about animal souls.
Animal souls.
Yeah. The source states they agree animals have souls, citing external confirmations and arguing against what they call religious egoism for thinking only humans do. Just sort of dropped in there.
Interesting. Okay, so let's recap the really core, impactful claims from this source transcript we've just unpacked.
Right. We've got this alleged Israeli plan targeting Iran's internal stability, aiming for revolution.
Then the really striking possibility of a dirty bomb provocation, maybe not even launched by Iran itself.
The potential intervention of those unnamed three strong nations acting as a check on Israel.
The truly dire prediction that a devastated Iran could be the trigger for a world war linked to this specific cursed year.
And finally, that incredibly unsettling, almost biblical vision of a strange skin disease causing isolation, connected somehow to the escalating conflict.
Well, it's a source absolutely packed with specific, dramatic, and often quite dark claims about the future.
Definitely. A very distinct perspective presented in this material.
And just to reiterate, our purpose here in this deep dive was simply to explore and understand the specific content within this source. We're looking at the source, not through it, to validate its claims.
Exactly. It's about understanding the narrative presented in the material itself.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. Based on what we've discussed from this source, considering these incredibly specific and vivid details, from the potential dirty bombs as a strategic provocation, right through to that bizarre and terrifying skin disease vision, what does the mere existence of fears, this specific, this dramatic, captured in a source like this, tell us about the kind of anxieties that might be swirling around in the world right now?